I planned the family trip, then my daughter called me 2 days away and said, "My father-in-law will replace you. He is more fun than you." I replied, "That's fine. What happened next will shock you. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Judith Graham from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I used to think planning things for other people was how you showed love. Not just birthdays or holidays, but the little stuff too. Like researching restaurants before a visit, finding hotel deals months in advance, even picking scenic routes just so they could have something nice to look at through the car window. That's the kind of father I've always been. Not flashy, not poetic, but dependable. The kind of man who shows up early, pays in full, and doesn't complain when he's left standing at the curb. My name's Raymond, but most people call me Ray. I'm 61, retired from a lifetime of construction work, and up until recently, I thought I was still part of my daughter's life. I started planning the family trip in March. It was supposed to be in July, something to get us out of our routines for a bit. I picked a quiet beach town up the coast. Nothing fancy, just a clean little rental house near the water with enough space for everyone. My daughter, her husband, their 2 boys, and me. I even found a local fishing charter, something I thought her husband might enjoy since he was always talking about how his own dad was the outdoorsy type. I booked everything in my name. Put the deposit down, reserved the house, bought new sandals for the boys, even checked the tide schedule. Every detail mattered to me, not because I needed to be thanked, but because I thought, maybe this would be the thing, the moment that reminded her who I was. My daughter, Lila, has always been closer to her in-laws. Her mother left when she was 12, and for a while, it was just the 2 of us. But once she married into her husband's family, big, loud people who all seemed to love brunch and matching t-shirts, she started shifting. First it was Thanksgiving at their house instead of mine. Then it was, we already made plans every time I offered something. I told myself it was normal, that she was building her own life, that she still loved me, even if she didn't say it out loud anymore. I mean, she still called me Dad when she needed help paying off her student loan, still invited me to babysit, still let me hold the kids. That had to mean something, right? I didn't expect gratitude, but I didn't expect replacement either. 2 days before we were supposed to leave, my phone rang around 5:30 p.m. I was cleaning out the cooler, tossing old ice packs, making sure everything was ready. Her name popped up and I answered quickly, half expecting her to ask what time we'd hit the road. Instead, she said, "Hey, so, don't get mad, but we're changing up the plans a little." I didn't even have time to respond before she continued, "Dad, listen. We were talking and thought it might be better if my father-in-law came instead. He's more fun than you." Just like that. No sugarcoating. No hesitation. Just, he's more fun than you. I don't remember much of what I said after. I think I muttered something like, "That's fine," and hung up. But the moment that phone went silent, my entire body locked up. I sat there at my kitchen table, the cooler half open on the floor, and just stared out the window for a long time. It felt like someone had poured cold water down my back. I didn't cry. I haven't cried in years, but there was this tight pressure in my chest, like I couldn't breathe without wanting to scream. Not because she chose him, but because she didn't even try to lie to make me feel better. That's how little I mattered in her eyes. Just a placeholder until someone more fun came along. I kept replaying her tone. How casual she was. How little it seemed to cost her to cut me out of something I'd built from the ground up. Every hotel reservation, every car rental, every damn itinerary, all of it suddenly meant nothing. And it wasn't about the money, though that hurt too. It was the way she said it, like I was the last person to know I'd already been voted off the island. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my recliner with the lights off, going over every memory that got us here. The time I worked double shifts to pay for her braces. The road trip we took the summer after her mom left. Just the 2 of us in a borrowed camper, eating canned soup and laughing at how bad we were at setting up tents. The way she used to call me her favorite person in the world. I held on to those moments like currency. I thought they still meant something. I was wrong. By sunrise, I had made up my mind. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. She made a choice. I would make mine. And for once, it wouldn't involve swallowing my pride just to keep the peace. The next morning, I didn't turn on the TV. Didn't make coffee. I just sat at the table with my keys in one hand and my phone in the other, thinking. Not rushing into action. Just staring at the weight of it all. 2 days from now, I was supposed to load up the car and drive north with my daughter and grandkids. Now, it wasn't even a maybe. I had been uninvited. Not officially. Not in those words. But what else do you call it when someone swaps you out like a pair of old shoes? That was the part that made my stomach churn. It wasn't even about the other man. It was about how little hesitation she had to say it. And worse, how she thought I'd just go along with it. I replayed the conversation like a bad voicemail. She had said it so flippantly. He's more fun than you. Like I was supposed to agree. Like fun was the only currency that mattered. Never mind the man who stayed up late planning routes to avoid her car sickness. Never mind the man who offered to foot the entire bill so no one else had to stretch their paychecks. No, what mattered was which grandpa made them laugh louder. Which one brought water balloons and stories with sound effects. That wasn't me. I was the quiet one. The steady hand. The fixer. I didn't perform. I didn't play guitar by the fire. And now, apparently, I didn't belong. Around 9 a.m., she texted. Just wanted to give you a heads up so you wouldn't be blindsided. Don't take it personally. We just thought the kids would have more fun this way. I stared at those words for a full minute before locking my phone and walking out the back door. I went to the garage, sat on the cooler I'd packed with snacks for the drive, and just stared at the lawn. My neighbor Pete wandered over. He's a good guy, older than me, lost his wife a few years ago. He looked at me and said, "You look like a man deciding between fight or flight." I chuckled bitterly. "Neither," I said. "Just deciding how quiet revenge should be." He whistled low. "That bad, huh?" I didn't give him the details. Just enough to say that I was being replaced. His eyes darkened. "You know, Ray, there's something to be said for letting people feel the cost of their own choices." I nodded. That line stuck with me all day. By noon, I opened my laptop and started canceling everything. One by one. The vacation rental, the charter boat, the car. Each cancellation felt like snipping a thread that had been holding my dignity hostage. I removed my cards from the shared travel account, something I set up so they could book activities without bugging me. It was all in my name anyway. I checked every login twice. Changed the passwords. Locked it all down. The silence felt cleansing. Like closing windows before a storm. It wasn't until I was halfway through canceling the theme park tickets that my phone rang. Her name again. I let it ring. Then again, 5 minutes later. Then twice back to back. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned my ringer off and let them all go to voicemail. I knew what would come. Confusion first. Then blame. Then the guilt parade. I wasn't about to walk it with her. At 5:02 p.m., I got a voicemail. I waited an hour before listening. Her voice was sharp, tight, like she was holding back tears, but not from sadness. From humiliation. "You embarrassed me. How could you cancel everything without telling me?" The boys were excited. "We told everyone. You made me look stupid." That last line got me. Not, "You hurt me," or "I miss you," or even "I'm sorry." Just, "You made me look stupid." Her biggest concern was how this looked to her friends, not what it meant between us. I deleted the voicemail. At 7:30 p.m., she sent one final text. "If you did this just to punish me, you succeeded. Happy now." I stared at it for a long time. I typed, deleted, typed again. Then I finally wrote, "Do not contact me again if it's just for selfish demands. I've had enough. No love, Dad. No sugar. No softening the blow. Just truth." I stood up, poured myself a glass of water, and sat out on the porch while the sky turned dark. I watched the wind pick up, pulling at the leaves like it wanted to rip the whole tree apart. It felt like a metaphor, something old and solid being tested at the root. But unlike that tree, I wasn't bending this time. She wanted to act like I was just some tool in her toolbox, someone to use when needed and shelve when not. But I've done too much, for too long, without asking for anything in return. I was done watching my kindness be turned into obligation. She could plan her trip with her fun father-in-law all she wanted. But she'd do it without my money, my time, or my presence. The morning of the trip arrived with the kind of eerie quiet that only comes after a storm. No texts, no calls, not even the hum of a group chat lighting up. I woke up early out of habit, still half expecting someone to need something, to ask a last-minute favor, to lean on me one more time. But nothing came. It was almost poetic. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the neatly folded stack of clothes I'd packed for the trip. The shirts I had ironed, the sandals I bought on sale, even the windbreaker I kept for boat rides. They sat untouched, like props from a play I'd been cut from at the last minute. I didn't move them. I just sat there, letting the stillness speak louder than any conversation could. I had always believed that quiet was the space where men found their peace. That morning, it felt like the place I went to mourn. By 8:30, I was halfway through my second cup of coffee and still hadn't turned on the TV or looked at my phone. The world could wait. I wasn't interested in social media updates or guilt-laced voicemails. I already knew what I'd see, some filtered photo of my daughter, smiling beside her father-in-law, holding my grandsons like they were cast in a catalog shoot for perfect families. I knew they'd pretend I was never supposed to be there in the first place. That's the part that stung the most. Not that I was cut out, but that no one would even acknowledge the cut. They'd smile through it, post the pictures, tag the location, and maybe even mention how grateful they were for family. It would be a show, and I wasn't invited. Around 10, I drove to the bank. I had a shared travel card I'd opened 6 months ago, mostly because it was easier to coordinate family expenses that way. I'd told her at the time, "This is just for emergencies or trip stuff." She had nodded, distracted, scrolling through her phone, barely listening. I remembered that moment too well now. Me trying to offer support, her treating it like background noise. I walked into the branch and had the card closed, transferred the funds into a private account. The teller, a soft-spoken young guy with a beard that hadn't quite filled in, asked me, "Any reason for the closure?" I said, "Just simplifying things," and left it at that. There was no use explaining a wound to someone who'd never bled like that. 2 hours before they were supposed to leave, when they'd all be piling into the car, probably loading up the cooler I bought, maybe even plugging in the route I had mapped, I hit cancel on the last of the reservations. The rental house was easy. The manager remembered me and sounded surprised when I said we wouldn't be coming. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Change of plans," I replied. She paused. "Would you like to reschedule?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "I think it's best we just leave things as they are." She gave me a polite goodbye, but I could feel the awkwardness. Even strangers could sense the fracture in my voice. I blocked her number, not forever, just enough to give myself space. I didn't want to risk picking up out of habit. I knew her tone too well, knew exactly how she'd sound when she wanted something. There was a switch she flipped when she needed to manipulate a situation, a mix of self-pity and accusation, sugar-coated blame. I'd fallen for it too many times. But this time was different. This time, she could scream into the void. My phone was a wall now, not a door. She must have realized what I'd done because the calls came fast after that. Blocked numbers, unknown IDs. Even her husband tried once. I didn't answer. I didn't even let it ring out. I sent each one straight to voicemail. I made lunch in silence. Sat at my kitchen table while the sun hit the hardwood just right. It was the most peace I'd felt in months. No buzzing, no asking, no pretending. Just me and the quiet I'd earned. Then came the knock. Pete again, my neighbor, the widower. He stood on my porch with a beer in each hand. "Thought you could use one," he said, handing me the bottle. I took it. We didn't speak for a while. Just sat on the porch, drinking in silence. He finally asked, "So they left without you?" I nodded. "Yep. Brought in the replacement," I said with a bitter laugh. Pete let out a low whistle. "And you let him?" he asked. I shook my head. "No. I canceled everything. Let them figure it out." Pete raised his bottle. "That's cold-blooded." I smirked. "It's honest." We sat there another 10 minutes, watching cars go by. He said, "She'll be back. They always come back when the money runs out." I looked at him and said, "If she comes back, it better not be for money." And I meant that. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just about one trip. It was about every time I had swallowed my pride for the sake of keeping the peace. Every moment I had bent over backward, and she barely looked up. Every version of love I had tried to give her that wasn't loud or entertaining enough. I wasn't going to be a quiet fixture in the background anymore. If she wanted a different father figure, then she could stick with him. That night, I finally listened to one voicemail. Just one. Her voice was tight, shrill, wounded. I can't believe you did this to me. I've never been more humiliated. Everyone is asking questions. I don't know what to tell them. I paused the message right there. I didn't need to hear more. That was the problem. It was always about how she looked, how she came off to others, never about what she actually did. She wasn't embarrassed that she'd hurt me. She was embarrassed that I didn't absorb it quietly like I usually did. I deleted the voicemail. Then I poured another drink, opened the back door, and let the warm night air remind me that peace isn't something people hand you. It's something you decide to keep. The voicemails came in like clockwork, each one a little more frantic than the last. I never played them all the way through. I'd listen to the first 10 or 15 seconds, just enough to catch the tone, then hit delete. They weren't messages so much as accusations, carefully disguised as desperation. She wanted me to feel guilty, to absorb the mess she'd made like I always did, to sweep up the broken glass while pretending it hadn't been her who threw the stone. It was the same pattern I'd seen since she was a teenager, turning every consequence into an injustice, every confrontation into an attack. But I wasn't stepping in this time. I was done softening the edges of her decisions so she wouldn't have to face the shape of her own behavior. By the third day, the text messages turned theatrical. We had to book a Motel 6 last minute. Dad, the boys were crying. Do you even care? How could you humiliate me like this? Then finally, you've made your point. Are you happy now? That one made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. It was never about what I felt. Never about the hurt. It was always about my point. As if this whole situation were a game I'd rigged just to score. Like I'd planned the entire trip just to snatch it away. That kind of thinking made me realize just how far apart we drifted. She saw my love as leverage. I saw hers as conditional. By then, the gossip had started. My sister called late that afternoon. Ray, did something happen with Lila? I heard from Carol that the whole trip was a disaster, and you just bailed. I took a breath. No, I didn't bail. I canceled what I paid for. She made other plans. I simply made mine. Silence. Then she let out a quiet, "Oh." I could hear the math happening in her head. She didn't press, didn't scold, just said, "That's a shame. You were so excited." That part stung a little. I had been. But excitement doesn't keep you warm when people start rewriting the truth. Later that evening, I got a knock on the door. It was Mallory, my niece. She's 30, married, works in digital marketing, or something equally incomprehensible to me. She came in holding a plastic container of baked ziti. "Mom said you probably hadn't eaten," she offered with a nervous smile. I took it, more touched than I let on. She didn't sit down right away. Just hovered by the entryway like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. I nodded to the armchair across from mine. "Sit," I said. "I'm not a monster." She sat, legs crossed, eyes cautious. "She's been talking," she said carefully. "Posting cryptic stuff on Instagram. Memes about betrayal. Hashtags like family first with sad emojis." I snorted. "Family first, huh? Funny how that works when the checkbook closes." Mallory gave a small smile, but didn't disagree. "Look," she said, leaning forward. "I know it's not my place, but I saw the original plan. The emails, the confirmations. You did everything. You paid for everything. Honestly, I would have canceled too." I looked at her for a moment, surprised. "She sent those to you?" Mallory nodded. "She was bragging about it 2 weeks ago. Said she didn't even have to lift a finger. That you had it all handled." I shook my head. That was it in a nutshell. She didn't want a dad. She wanted a concierge. Mallory leaned back. "She's embarrassed, Uncle Ray. But she's not sorry. Not yet." I sighed. "I don't need her to be embarrassed. I need her to grow up." Mallory was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Sometimes when people realize they can't manipulate you anymore, they convince themselves you've changed." I nodded slowly. "I haven't changed. I just finally started believing myself." "Good," she said, standing. "Hold that line." After she left, I opened the ziti and ate it cold. It tasted like comfort, in a strange way, like someone had noticed that I'd been carrying too much and decided to lighten the load, even just for a night. I didn't cry. I haven't cried in a long time. But I did sit back and let the weight of everything finally settle. I wasn't lonely. I was clearing space. Space that had been taken up by obligations I never agreed to, by expectations I never set. Later that night, I got one more message. This time from her husband. I don't know what your issue is, but this is affecting the kids. You owe them better. I didn't respond. What I owe my grandkids is an example. An example of what it looks like to stand up for yourself when even your own blood tries to walk over you. I'm not just their grandfather. I'm a man. And this man was done being treated like a doormat with a bank account. I turned off my phone, closed the blinds, and let the night hold me. I had nothing left to explain. Let the voicemails pile. The first time I saw her after the trip was almost 2 weeks later, in the cereal aisle at Wilton's Market. I had debated going earlier in the morning to avoid crowds, but old habits die hard. I wasn't expecting anything more dramatic than price tags and the squeaky wheels of shopping carts. But when I turned the corner, there she was, Lila, standing by a shelf of organic granola bars, holding a box of oat cereal, mid-conversation with one of her boys. For a split second, I froze. Not from fear, but from instinct, like my body knew this moment was going to leave a mark. She looked up and saw me almost instantly. Her eyes widened. I could see the calculation happen in her face, the quick debate over whether to walk away or lean into it. She chose the latter. Of course she did. Really, Dad? You're just out shopping like nothing happened. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. A woman near the frozen section looked over. A stock boy paused mid-shelf. I didn't say anything right away, just kept my hand on the cart handle and breathed slowly, bracing myself. My daughter stepped closer, cereal box still in hand, her eyes sharp and accusing. You canceled the entire trip. The boys were devastated. We had to scramble for a motel. You humiliated me in front of my in-laws, she hissed. Her words came in short, clipped bursts. She was trying not to make a full scene, but she wanted me to squirm. Wanted me to apologize, right there between the Cheerios and gluten-free granola. I took a breath, then met her eyes. You replaced me, I said. I just accepted it. That stopped her. Just for a second. Her lips parted, eyes narrowed. It wasn't like that. You're twisting it. I shook my head. No. You told me, in your own words, that your father-in-law would be taking my place because he's more fun. I didn't twist anything. I just listened. She crossed her arms, cereal box wedged into her elbow. You could have handled it better. So could you, I said, voice calm but low. But you didn't. And for once, I didn't pretend that was okay. Her son tugged at her sleeve then, asking if they could get fruit snacks. She waved him off without looking. Her face was turning red, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. I could see it. The embarrassment of having this conversation in public, the awareness that people were listening, the sudden realization that maybe she hadn't fully thought this moment through. You made everything worse, she muttered. You didn't just punish me. You punished the whole family. No, I said, shaking my head. I stopped enabling you. There's a difference. That line landed hard. I could tell. She flinched, barely, then straightened herself like she was bracing for round 2. But she didn't speak. Not immediately. She just stood there, jaw tight, eyes glassy. And for a brief second, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, she finally heard me. Not the version of me she invented to be angry at, but me. The father who had stood quietly in the background for years, finally choosing to step out of the shadows. She looked down, then muttered, You didn't even call to check on us. That one stung more than I let on. I did care. I always had. But I wasn't going to be guilt back into silence. No, I said, because calling you would have meant pretending I didn't matter. And I do. Even if I have to be the only one who says it out loud. She said nothing. Just turned and walked away with her cart and her son. No goodbye. No apology. Just silence. But even in that silence, I felt something shift. Not between us, at least not yet, but within me. As I stood there, staring at boxes of cereal I no longer wanted, a woman I didn't recognize approached. Probably mid-50s, wearing a Wilton's apron. She said, I'm sorry, but I couldn't help overhearing. That was something. I gave a tight smile. Yeah, something. She paused, then added, it's rare. A parent standing their ground like that. Good for you. I nodded, surprised by the lump forming in my throat. I didn't trust my voice enough to thank her properly, so I just nodded again and pushed my cart toward the checkout. Back home, I put the groceries away in silence. Every cabinet I opened, every item I shelved, felt like reclaiming space. Not just in my kitchen, but in my life. I wasn't trying to win anymore. I was just trying to be whole. I didn't check my phone that night. Didn't replay the conversation. I didn't need to. The moment was still there, etched in my bones. The look in her eyes when I told her the truth, the way her silence said more than any argument could. For the first time in a long while, I felt the edges of something solid beneath my feet. Boundaries. Real ones. And I wasn't backing down. 2 weeks passed. No texts. No calls. No voicemails. The silence was louder than any shouting match, more final than any slammed door. At first, it felt like walking through fog. Thick, disorienting, unfamiliar. I had grown used to her presence, even if most of it came in the form of requests or criticism. For a man like me, raised to see provision as affection, withdrawal felt unnatural. But I didn't give in. I didn't check her social media. Didn't ask around. Didn't nudge the hornet's nest just to see if it still stung. Instead, I focused on the small, quiet rituals that reminded me I existed outside of her needs. Morning coffee on the porch, Sunday crossword puzzles, the hum of the garage radio while I cleaned out old tools I hadn't touched in years. Grief came in waves, but not in the way people usually describe. It wasn't a sobbing on the floor kind of pain. It was subtler. A missing chair at the table. A silence in the middle of a joke I once would have shared. A hesitation before ordering something in bulk, realizing I no longer had to plan for anyone else. That's the part they don't tell you about choosing peace. You don't just lose the pain. You lose the parts of yourself you built around someone else's presence. But as the days passed, that loss started to feel less like a wound and more like a reset. Like clearing out a room and realizing how little sunlight had been coming in through the clutter. Then came the envelope. It showed up on a Tuesday, tucked between a grocery flyer and a charity newsletter. No return address, just my name in familiar handwriting. I took it inside, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at it for a long while before opening it. Part of me expected a list of grievances. Another part expected a plea for money. But what I found was simpler and more complicated than that. Inside was a photo. A printed snapshot, the kind you had to get developed. It was old, probably 25 years. In it, I was holding Lila, maybe 6 years old, on my shoulders at the county fair. She was laughing, hands in the air, one of those ridiculous, oversized stuffed animals tucked under her arm. I looked younger, happier, unburdened in a way I could barely remember. On the back, in her handwriting, was a single sentence. You used to laugh more. No apology, no explanation, just that. A memory, handed back to me like a truce offering without a treaty. I stared at the photo for a long time. My first reaction was anger. How dare she bring up that moment, use my own history as a weapon. But the more I sat with it, the more the edges of that anger softened. Not because I forgave her, not because I was ready to forget, but because that picture reminded me of something I'd been quietly grieving since this all began. Who I used to be before she learned how to hurt me. She was right about one thing. I did laugh more back then, but it wasn't because I was happier. It was because I hadn't yet learned how easily love could be weaponized. I hadn't yet been turned into a utility, a fallback plan, an ATM with feelings. Back then, I was just dad. No strings. No caveats. I didn't call her. Didn't text. But I didn't throw the picture away either. I slipped it into the top drawer of my desk, where I keep the watch my father gave me, the receipt from my first house, the letter I wrote to myself the day after my divorce. It's not a shrine. It's not forgiveness. It's just a place to remember. That night, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I looked at the lines on my face, the silver in my hair, the quiet around my eyes. And for once, I didn't feel the need to justify anything. I didn't feel the pull to chase after closure. Sometimes people don't change. Sometimes they don't even try. And sometimes the only apology you'll ever get is the silence that follows after you stop answering the door. But there was something freeing about that. I'd spent so much of my life trying to be the version of a father who kept everything together. The planner, the provider, the fixer. But maybe the best thing I ever did, for both of us, was stop showing up to be replaced. The next morning, I went out for breakfast alone, brought the crossword puzzle, sat by the window. The waitress asked if I was waiting for anyone. I said nope, just me. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. If you've ever been sidelined, silenced, or taken for granted by someone you raised, this story was for you. Sometimes the only way to reclaim your worth is to walk away, even when it's someone you love. Have you ever had to let go of a family member to protect your peace? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you felt this story in your chest, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true tales of family, fallout, and finding your voice. See you soon in the next story.